So if you're just joining us today, I'm Paula Gilbert. I'm the editor of Connecting Africa. And today with me, I have Fiona Tabraham, who is the CEO of Capacity, which is the Cape Innovation and Technology Initiative. Also, Chris Fabian, the CEO of Giga, which we've heard a bit about this week already. And Anita van Vieren, the Chief Education Specialist at the Western Cape Government. So welcome, guys. Very nice to have you with me. The topic today is an interesting one, I think. Digital skills Africa, why an educated youth is key to unlocking the fourth industrial revolution. It's something I'm interested in because we all know how young Africa's population is and how critical it is that the youth are really equipped with all the skills, specifically digital skills, to succeed in life. And truly unlock the potential of that fourth industrial revolution for Africa. So let's jump right in with some questions. I think it's important maybe to set the scene, first of all, of where we are when it comes to skills in Africa, and maybe this perceived skills gap and the talent pipeline. So Chris, I'm going to come to you first. Maybe you can just start off by giving us a bit of an overview of where you think we are when it comes to digital skills and a bit of the work that Giga is doing in this regard.
Super, thanks. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Paula. There's a slide, right? Or there's no slide?
I think so. Did we have a
Otherwise, I can
picture?
paint a picture with my hands. We'll see if the slide comes up, but if it doesn't, I'll just describe it. We are in a place in the world with the highest possible potential and the furthest distance between us and that potential of anywhere that I know. We have a critical moment that is like we're living in it right now, and the project that I work on, and our team is here, is called Giga. It's a connectivity project. It looks simply at driving connectivity to young people to get them ready for the future. And the reason I say there's a huge gap is that if you look at a map of connectivity in Brazil, or in Kazakhstan, or in Cambodia, or in other countries where Giga is working, you see that schools and towns are connected and young people have access to the digital surface. If you look at that same map in Sierra Leone, for example, you see that there is very, very little of the same type of connectivity that's driving development in the rest of the world. And if you're a 14-year-old and you don't have access to the internet, and the internet's like mostly a terrible place, right? I think we can all, it's not a safe place, it's not a good place, but it is a place of opportunity. And if you're a 14-year-old and you don't have access to that, you have no ability to be part of the future that's coming. You are absolutely out of the next 20 years. And how angry would you be? I would be super, super upset. And they are, rightfully. You don't have access to learn about things. You don't even know what there is to know. And so when we talk about fourth industrial revolution and all of that great stuff, the kids who aren't in the green world, in the connected world, in the world of gigabytes are totally left out. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and that's what I'm really excited to talk about today.
Yeah, very interesting. Fiona, how would you sort of classify the state of digital skills at the moment and kind of the work you guys are doing?
Okay, so again, thank you for having me here today, and welcome to everybody. This is such a critical topic and something I'm so passionate about. We deal predominantly with post-school education of young people to train them in digital skills and get them into the world of work. So we're looking at what good looks like in the world of work and trying to back engineer that into what we're training. And so my focus on the problem very much is how you allow young people access to the workplace if they're coming with no digital skills. And if you think about a modern world and a modern workplace, at very basic terms, we're asking people to apply for a job normally online, normally with a CV. We walk them into a workplace and we expect them to sit in front of a computer or to interact with a set of digital skills and tasks. And therefore, if young people are coming out of an education system without those basic skills, they're automatically excluded from a workforce that is a higher economic earning workforce. So they're moved towards jobs that are still manual or low paid or low earning jobs. And that is inherently unfair because we have a huge amount of talent in Africa. We if people tell me that we don't have talented youth or youth are disengaged or disinterested in the digital world, and quite honestly, I think that's rubbish. That's not true at all. We see an amazing, talented group of young people that genuinely want the opportunity, but they're blocked from it by not given the access to digital skills in schools, to mobile, to cheap data, to equipment, to actually learn those skills, as many youth are in more modern societies.
Yeah, very, very important. Anita, obviously being in the public sector and education specifically, how important is it to have effective education to make sure that our communities are flourishing?
I think, Paula, thank you again for having us, and I think it's a lovely opportunity to reimagine communities. What is a community? I think if we're honest with ourselves, we each represented here, we are representing different kinds of communities. So if I think of a flourishing community, let's start there. What does that look like? Because that is what we want to build. That is where quality of life lies. So if I imagine a flourishing community, I imagine a place where there is recreational activities, there are places for social interaction, there's high level of understanding and empathy of people and a caring nature, but also empowering communities. There's a place where people have high social capital, and that's important. And I think that brings change. And I think that is the place where we need to gear our efforts towards is how do we establish communities that are flourishing. Now, if you look at SA stats, something that inspired me, I just stumbled upon it accidentally, was the fact that they say, recent reports say that we still have a challenge in South Africa with regard to income poverty. That is something that's very relevant. But something that's often underrated is the asset poverty in our country, which means that when you have income, you don't necessarily have access to water, to electricity, to environments that can bring quality to your life. And I think if we, even another example is, let's say I've got enough income, but I don't have sufficient income to buy high quality devices. I don't have sufficient income to support my community and to really live. We're just living sometimes on the borderline of survival, if I can put it like that. So asset poverty is something that is underrated. So why am I mentioning all of this? I think when we look at communities, we need to look at them in the light of how do we diversify our livelihood, because that brings quality of life, and I believe education can bring that through. And education is not just schooling, and I'm saying that very profound directly. That education comes from industry, education comes from communities, from parents, from industry getting involved in communities, and therein lies flourishing communities for me.
Yeah. Chris, obviously the work you are doing is you're trying to connect every school. It's a big aim, but an important one. But like you mentioned, we need to know what the data is before we know what the problems are, right? So how important is that, sourcing, figuring out where actually are the gaps?
Yeah, so we've spent the last 2 years mapping schools, and schools for us are a center point for a community. It's not that, a lot of schools are terrible, and a lot of what happens in schools doesn't really help kids get ready for the future, if we're going to be really honest. But a school is a center point of community, and it's a beacon of learning. And nobody knows how many schools there are in the world. There's no denominator. We think they're between 5 and 7 million. But if you don't know where those schools are, or how many there are, you can't even start to address the issue of kids and connectivity. And I was talking about 3-4 months ago with President Masisi in Botswana about this issue of connectivity and data. And he said that Giga and the type of work that is happening with connectivity is going to create, in a landlocked country like we just heard about in South Sudan, is going to create the digital ports of the future. And he said this for us, every place where you have these connected communities, that's where ports will be. That's where we will be able to export things and import things and build our own products. And I was thinking, Paul, and also just as you were talking, Anita, if you look at a port, there are kind of two types of traffic there. They're the big ships that come in, and those are the ones you want to be part of. And there are these little ships that go in, people collect the plastic bottles or collect little things. There's no dignity in that. It's not positive, it's not good, and it's not the size of the big container ships. And so I think what we're trying to also figure out is how do you make sure that the ports that are being developed allow for Africa to develop serious technical dignity and content and capacity that's not just leaving us again to be at the end of big international companies sending us their stuff. And so I think it's a really important question of how we deal with and what we build here.
Yeah, and we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So, Anita, we're talking about unlocking that. What does that actually mean? How do we unlock it?
I think if I think of the fourth industrial revolution, it's firstly known for the rapid change in industry, technology, and also social interaction. And I think, first of all, we need to understand that when you look at digital citizen, what does that look like? And what it looks like today is it's going to be different tomorrow. And so when I look at youth specifically, I want to see a person that is comfortable to switch between different technologies, that switch between different communities and industries, and for not just for work purpose, but in order to complete tasks, in order to do the normal day-to-day living. So what is that person? That person is a resourceful person. That person is inquisitive. I think of our own workplace, we are constantly challenged with capacity. So we need people in the workplace that is not dependent on spoon-feeding skills, but rather being able to self-initiate their learning. So unlocking the future, and 4IR for me is somebody that are able to really be comfortable in that. Then also thinking of skills, because that is also where my speciality and interest lies, is how do we equip people? And one of the things that we see often is that we focus a lot on basic skills training, and we focus a lot on the basic use of technology and very low levels of integration, actually, very low levels of depth of learning happens through normal training that goes to the masses. We've got pockets of excellence where some people do go through deep learning, and where some people do have an opportunity for mastering of high-level integration. But if we look at the masses, I think we focus a lot on basic usage, and then the end result of that can be people say, but I've never been taught how to do certain things. I've never, I don't know where to even start to deliver on a high level of integration. And if we cannot get past that thing about saying, here's a task, and then your response is, but I've never been taught that, then we are not comfortable in the 4IR. And one of the things that I think is important, we need to come and, how can I put this? Let me use one example, last example, and then I'll finish. But imagine a teacher. Quickly sit yourself and your teacher. Everybody here had a teacher. Maybe you are a teacher. You come to the school, you've never had technical training necessarily. You never have had branding and all these lovely industry and knowledge, but you are tasked to advertise a fundraising. Now, how do you go about? Traditionally, we would just say, send out a newsletter or word of mouth. The reality is that we can't reach more faster through that methods. So how does a teacher or a person that is not necessarily in a typical industry reach into industry, reach into different technologies and switch between them naturally to accomplish a task? So yeah, I do hope that when teachers come together, they can comfortably move and say, I can digitize, I can create digital objects, and I'm able to really have that interaction globally without having a barrier in your mind that you are stuck in the place where you are.
Yeah. So Fiona, what she's talking about, isn't this where, upskilling and career accelerators come in?
Yes and no. So absolutely. I mean, what we're doing right now is we're solving a problem that has been created for the last few generations. We're picking up post-school young people with limited digital skills, and we're trying to accelerate them into what is already a scarce skills gap. So we all know, and I'm sure everybody in this room is sitting here knowing I've got vacancies in my world of work, and we know what the skills are, but that's a here and now problem. And there's only three ways that you can build talent, or create talent. You either buy the talent in, which is what most people are doing now. They're pushing the price range up for certain jobs, and everybody's competing with each other. You can build the talent for what you've currently got in your organization, or you can develop that talent from the bottom upwards and through the schools and through the education system. So yes, we can pick things up, and we can do amazing things because, as I say, we've got a fantastic group of talented young people, certainly in South Africa and Africa. And we've got a lot of young and dynamic and resilient and tenacious people that we can work with. But what we've also got to do is invest in that love and that engagement and that career aspiration in digital transformation. Because if we're not bringing it into the schools and into the language and into our communities and into our narrative of a career pathway, we're going to still see people who are bright and smart and technically savvy or mathematical or scientific going down your traditional pathways. And we as a community and ecosystem of tech people and people that have an investment in the fourth industrial revolution need to now go out and get that message across Africa about the opportunities that come in this industry and the job creations and the job pathways and driving people to actually see that as an opportunity. Because we need more young people actually becoming, through an education system that actually are driving themselves to learn the technical skills, that are engaging with it and going home and engaging with their families and their peers and their networks and the communities around digitization and becoming the digital natives that you talk about.
But often we obviously have a lot of people with these entry-level skills that are being trained, and then we have a lot of high-level people. But what about that like middle section? How do we make sure that the pipe is always full and we're going to be able to fill that?
Absolutely. Multiple entry points. You cannot just focus on one point. You have to be starting with a broad-based triangle and moving people up. With any career, with anything that people do, it's got to be an innate interest in the individual as well. So the broader the bottom of the pyramid is that you start with, the more people you get engaged and online and digitally savvy and working with digital equipment and with the basic skills, the more opportunity you've got to spot the talent and then progress that talent up. And it comes with a combined effort from everybody involved. So at the moment, what's happening is we're all doing pockets of things, and there's some amazing things happening. We're seeing a great amount of success with some of the training programs we're running, as in 100% absorption into the world of work. So if we get it right, if we understand what the world of work wants, and we back engineer that into the training that we do, the success rate is really high. But there's only so much we can do at that level. And what we've got to do is we've got to work with the different parties and the different people to spot the talent and create a pipeline of talent so that everybody that comes out of a schools program that's really been engaged needs to be then put into the next level upwards and engaged at that middle level. And then the next level up, because, if we're going to create the future software developers of the world, they're only going to be 20% of the 100% that you started with. But the remaining 80% are going to be really much more digitally enabled and may move into different careers in different areas where they will take those skills with them and be able to do a much better job.
Yeah. Chris, do you agree? I saw you nodding. And where do you see other gaps? I mean, infrastructure is obviously an issue.
So I think that our education system is totally broken. That's the gap. So the gap is that we have a thing that doesn't work, and you're pushing kids through it, and you're trying to get something out at the other end, and this thing was built for 200 years ago, and it's not good. When we have other systems that are broken in the world, we've tried to solve that in various ways. So in the health system, where you also 20 years ago had a huge gap between people who didn't have access to a formal health system and those who were lucky enough to do it, UNICEF, or GIGA is hosted by UNICEF. UNICEF and others pioneered this idea of normalizing community health workers, people who are in a community who provide that layer between a formal system and the individual when that individual can't get to a big hospital. And I think there's something needed like that too for information. I think we need to think about community information workers. You'll remember it if you lived, if you lived in East Africa during the beginning of the mobile phone revolution. You'd have the people selling scratch cards, right, with the vests and Celtel, and all the villages would be painted Celtel. They didn't just sell you the card; they would teach you how to use the phone. They'd say you can send an SMS with some credit. You can send one of these numbers to your family. You can move money that way. They would teach you these tricks that got you to use it. And that person is a layer between the formal system and the individual. And I think we need that. That's how you don't get just the 20% developers, because what about the girl who doesn't want to be a developer? She wants to do something else, or the boy who wants this. And so I think when we're looking at investing in infrastructure, we are also thinking about putting the same amount in OpEx into community infrastructure, human infrastructure, people who can train, not forever. It's not to keep them in a job forever, but for that, like the Celtel person. Just to get that kickstart happening, because otherwise you do something like, let's put in a robotics curriculum, and you have no teachers who understand what robotics is. 60% of teachers in Uganda can't read a paragraph in English, which is the main language of instruction. Doesn't matter how much fourth IR you pack into there, it's not going to do anything. So I think we need to focus on this layer around, because the center of it is just not working.
But surely we need some changes to the actual education systems as
That's
well.
Anita's job.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, maybe you can jump in here. Maybe what are some of the projects that are kind of working, some of the success stories we're seeing, changing curriculums, schools, universities?
Sure, there is so many things happening. Like Fiona said, I think there's multiple entry points, and then you find a lot of pockets of excellence. And let me start maybe from my own experience quickly. So I don't know a long time I have, not too much, so I don't want to bore you. So I've been very privileged to have seen different elements of education. I was a foundation phase teacher, I was a lecturer, I did some dancing training and some lecturing, writing content on ECD development. So, and I've been involved in EdTech communities, and I've been involved in transforming schools towards digital transformation. These days, I am more inclined towards the program design and development of teacher professional development in service training, and more specifically, leader development. And in all of that, there's so many things happening. And education is never just the schooling system. And I want to start there. Because as soon as we think education, we want to look at it from classroom, school building, teachers, learners. And as soon as you start looking at education from that perspective, you design solutions for that setting. And I think when we are honest with ourselves, education happens inside and outside the classroom. It happens before you go to school. It happens after you went to school. Education is a life journey. So let me maybe bring it now back to the typical school environment. So in the Western Cape, we were very fortunate to have political drive. A few years back, I think in around about 2014, Western Cape government decided they're going to work on an interdepartmental development plan for the province. And I think therein lied a lot of amazing outputs, in the sense that different departments work towards the same game changers, we called them. And yes, there were good and bad elements to it, and there's always the success stories and the not so success stories. But when I came into WCD in 2018, prior to that I was in the provincial office in the Free State. But when I came in here, I could really see a much deeper level of integration, not yet at the level that I think is sustainable, but a level of integration that is workable. And I thought to myself, there's something that happened right. So one of the 8 drivers, there were many drivers in the e-learning game changer, and one of those drivers were enabling environments, and they really thought of end-to-end solutions. So when the broadband came into the environment of the school, it was pulled through into classrooms, into labs. Labs were immediately sourced. So there were an end-to-end solution in the project line. It wasn't just broadband and then the project ends, and then we start a new project. So in the planning itself, there were chain reactions built into the plan. So one of them was the enabling environment. Another thing that was part of that was the digital transformation plan in terms of training, and then also enabling a e-portal, which was a content development or content distribution platform. And then all of that was part of the Game Changer programs, so it wasn't just one element. And when that was initiated, we also had some innovation projects started with special projects, and that's how I got involved. So I was the special project manager for anything special. That means anything that comes that they don't know where to put it. They gave it in a way to me. And we did some VR explorations. We did coding and robotics. We already implemented or started the implementation in 2018, where we rolled out and started the demystification process. And I think people that know me maybe know the word demystification is something that is always found on my lips, because in our country, people don't always have the knowledge of what we are implementing. Not how, I'm not even getting to the how, we get into the what. What is coding? Why do we need it? Before we talk about just how do you do it. And I think therein lies a lot of the success stories, that there are interdepartmental programs often that leads to stronger implementation initiatives. And then what's in our pipeline, in a way, I know recently we appointed a few officials that deal specifically with coding and robotics. So there's traction in that, even though at national that is not yet appointed. So we're trying to foresee what are the things needed, and we try and implement it in small but effective ways as best possible. But I can go on about that still. Let me stop now.
It's great to hear some success stories and things that are working well. I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit, though, Fiona, and come to you and kind of ask you, what's the knock-on effect if we don't get these digital skills out to the youth, if they end up excluded from the digital world?
Gosh, I think, oh gosh, it's such a big question, and it saddens me terribly, because I think, unfortunately, definitely in South Africa and in Africa, we have almost a wooden ceiling on youth. And I call it a wooden ceiling and not even a glass ceiling, because you can't even see above it. You can't see what you're missing out on. We put youth into a bucket, and we depress them down, and we just say, well, we'll just leave you in that thing, and we won't have to worry about it, because it's so scary and so difficult to deal with, and actually we don't know how to get onto it. And so what happens is you've got I think the average age of people in Africa is 17. So we've got a population of young people who have hopes and dreams and aspirations and places that they want to go to and things that they want to do with their lives. And actually, we're not enabling them to do that. And if I'm going to be a terrible pessimist and say, if we don't do something about it, and if we don't connect our youth, where is Africa going to go? What terrible circumstances are we going to reap from that, if I'm really going to think badly about it? But there is so much available, there is so much online, there's so many amazing learning programs, but let's connect the dots, let's digitize people, let's give them access, let's give them cheap data, let's give them the equipment, let's make IT fun, let's get games out into the communities, let's get people playing, and engaging and learning, and think, wow, this is fantastic, because that's where change comes. And so yeah, I don't want to be a pessimist, but I think if we don't do something about it now, I think we really are heading towards a very big challenge in Africa.
Yeah, but we were talking about it before, and I found it quite interesting what you were saying about, the aptitude of kids and what you see in terms of what you think you need from schooling, and then sort of the skills that kids have that maybe weren't that good at maths or whatever. Maybe tell us a bit about that.
So I think we have very traditional proxies for talent, particularly in South Africa, which is context I know very well, but I've got no doubt that happens across all of Africa. We from an HR background, and that is my background as well, we're very pleased with ourselves, because we've set very nice selection criteria and very nice online application processes and CVs and psychometric tests and things like that we think, gosh, we've been so clever, because we've taken our pool and we've narrowed it right down to this perfect fit for the organization. And actually what we're not considering is, but how's that adding to our diversity and our strength in difference in the organization? So if you think of a young person that's come through a non-traditional route, if they've had a poor education system and they've not had access to things, it doesn't mean that they don't have the talent and the aptitude to do it. So we've got to look at alternative proxies to measuring that talent. We see a lot of young people that are very, very mathematically inclined, because they may have worked in their parents' spaza shop and counted up the change and counted up money, and they're quick and they're sharp with calculation. Youth are incredibly resilient. They know how to hustle. Because if you're in an environment where you don't have a lot, you really get out there and you find solutions. So incredibly solution-orientated, amazing team workers, by nature of a lot of what our young people experience, they have to work together. They work together and they support each other, and they connect very, very well. And so, all of those attributes are things from a traditional HR perspective we look for. We want people that have conceptual thinking, that can solve problems, that are resilient, that can come out and be tenacious, and can have a sharp mental ability to make, to see patterns in their heads and things. And actually, I think we find that in a lot of young people. We've just got to find alternative ways to test that and to select against that and see, actually, this is what's representing talent, and this is what we can work with, and therefore shift into a digital career pathway. And these are the ones that maybe haven't got that aptitude and then shift towards other jobs.
Yeah. Chris, you're talking about the system being broken. To me, that sounds like we need a skills reboot, right? So where do you think the responsibility for that lies? Is it with governments? Is it with private sector? Is it collaborations between?
I think it's with all of us who are lucky enough to have money and access wherever you are. There's a big danger to everybody in this room, to governments, to anybody in power. The danger is this. So we've got a little slogan. Everybody has a slogan. Ours says we give young people access to information, opportunity, and choice. And those are three things, and that's in order. Information is easy. Information is like you can get to Wikipedia, and then you can see the ceiling. You can be pissed off about what you're not getting, but you're still kind of angry. So information is there, right? Opportunity is like, well, you can do that one job.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can work at the petrol station. You can do that little thing. You know how to use a till. You know how to count and get it's not very grand. You can do one thing. Choice is that you have dignity. You have the ability to choose among multiple options. If you don't give people choice, if people don't have dignity, they will burn the world down. It's not a question of who solved it. If you don't solve it, it's a really bad future. And so I think when we think about this, my worry is that you go to Juba, you go north of Juba, you go to Wau, farther out, or you go outside of Kampala, you go up to Kitgum, you go past Kitgum, and you see the digital future there is like digital rubbish collection. It's the least dignified thing in the world. You have companies coming from outside that are putting digital data annotation in Africa, right? So that's what our digital future should be, that we should have people annotating somebody else's data. That's disgusting. That's not a digital future. That's digital poverty. And people will be angry, and they should be angry. So I think that it's not only any one person's, it's anybody who wants a stable world, because lack of dignity leads to total chaos in my mind.
Yeah. I think we've got a bit of time for some audience questions. I don't know if anyone out there has something that they want to ask. Put up your hand if you've got a question.
We have happier material too.
Yeah, I know. It's getting quite dark over
Sorry.
here. So there we go. Go on in the back. So just tell us who you are and who your question is for. We've got a mic coming your way. Anyone else? Come on, guys. We've got to bring you alive. All right, we've got another one over there.
Good morning. My question is for Chris. My name is Andre Young. I run a business called Business Transformation Design. And my question goes to his comment about dignity. The modernity of the world has left many behind. I'd like to know what your thoughts are around what the key variables are that we need to actively shape in order that the modernity contributes to exponential dignity.
So I've got a pretty simple answer to that. It's about money. Like, without money, you've got nothing. And so if you look at the Giga maps, you go to projectconnect.world, you look at the map of the world, you see a lot of places that are disconnected. In those disconnected places, you can't get money. So you can be, so you take Wau in South Sudan, and you're a kid in Wau. You can't get paid for anything in digital money. You can maybe get a little bit of regular currency, but you're not part of anything real. So if you build something, you won't get paid for it, which means you can't improve life for your family. And what do any of us want to do but that? So if we don't have access to the digital surface, the 2/3 of the world's people who really fundamentally don't have no access to money, to progress. And that's dignity. It's building stuff. It's building a future. It's being able to send money to your family when they need it. It's all of that. And if the arteries are cut off and the capillaries get nothing, you have no exponential. You don't even have a linear growth. You just have anger. So for us, this connectivity and digital is about providing that access to financial dignity and letting people build things that matter to them.
Yeah, very good answer. We had another question over there. Is anyone else got a question? This side? All right, so we'll start up there. We'll maybe do two at the same time, and then they can answer.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lizanne, and I don't have a question as much as maybe a comment. So when we talk about the digital skills for the youth, I find that we often separate the digital skills from basic career readiness, and it's a huge gap that we've identified. So I'm from a company called GradLink, with a C, if you want to look it up, and we're launching in the next 2 weeks. It's a graduate employment platform in South Africa. And we were looking for value adds to students and graduates to make sure that they're career ready when they start. And I was very surprised. I could not find a local solution to help students to practice for interviews. A very simple thing, you know, they can't go to the career office, they don't know where to go. And I was looking for a solution to perhaps record themselves, maybe have some AI feedback. And I could not find a local solution. There's a world of technology available and digital skills, but yet when we start at the basics, can they communicate those skills to the employer if they don't know how? If we can look at technology solutions to help them from the very basics to make sure by the time they have to transfer those skills, you know, they're able to because they actually had the experience. But I can't pay for international solutions because they build in dollars, they charge in dollars, it doesn't make sense in our context. Yet I'm lacking local solutions just to start at the basics. So it's great that we can get them going and, you know, educated youth and we're transferring those skills. But what are we doing just to start with the basics? If there's anyone with solutions or if you have any opinions, I would love to hear about that.
Okay, wonderful. If anyone has any, please find that lady afterwards.
If I can just,
Yeah,
add
sure,
to
do you
that,
wanna
just to
comment?
say that everything that we do in the capacity incubators is aligned with soft skills. It's absolutely integrated into our programs as well as the application of skills. So a training program that just does theory is not worth the paper it's written on. Because businesses and organizations want people with social skills, with communication skills, with the ability to apply what they've learnt, with the ability to have practiced something and failed at it and asked their peers and got some feedback and redone it again. And so when you're looking, you know, anybody's looking at development programs, please look at all three aspects. Look at the technical training, look at the application of that technical training, and look at a fully integrated soft skills program, not just a couple of days going through a tick box, where people are practicing and applying and learning those soft skills. It's essential for people to succeed.
Yeah, very important. We've got a question down here.
Yeah, hi. Ben Roberts, Liquid Telecom. Question for Anita. You are obviously one of the first school districts on the continent of Africa to make the investment in putting broadband into most schools. So if you were sitting with Chris here and you were talking to a Minister of Education or to a president, and that minister was thinking about making investment to put broadband into all their schools, what would you tell them? With what you see now at WCG, what would you advise that president or that minister?
Shoo, how long do I have? Okay. First of all, I think it's important to understand that broadband can go to those on the grid. We've got 191 schools that are not on the grid. What is the solution for them? So that would be my first question. So in the planning, initially, everybody thought, no, it's going to be on the grid, it's going to be on the, and it wasn't. So we sit with a group of schools that cannot be part of the rollout plan because of the fact that they are not on the grid. Then we sit with a situation where those are often very rural. They are multi-grade schools. I don't know if everybody is familiar with the concept of multi-grade. It's where grade 1, 2, and 3 are all together in one classroom, and the teachers rotate. There's one teacher, and they have to teach this group, hold this one busy, hold this one busy. So suddenly you sit with a situation where one teacher has to produce 3 levels of education, and maybe for that particular school setting, the rollout plan was never to have 3 different levels of education in one classroom. So my request would be very difficult, but I think it will maybe bring a lot of change, and that is where we can look at integrated social impact projects that does not rely on 1 or 2 types of service providers, that looks at the solution from a very broad perspective, saying this is the challenge, who gets involved to solve that challenge, not having a solution to fit the categories of problems. And if I may, I've often spoken with industry, and they sit with me and they share with me a solution that's very educational. but it doesn't address the granular level challenge that I, as an official, have to address this year. So even though it is it's a good project for education, when I have to align priorities and see where I have to invest my time in, I sit with similar situations as that lady there above, saying, I've got this particular need. Can you assist me with that need just for now? Because that is the low-hanging fruit and the deliverable I have to work on. So just to work on big projects that speaks to the general education is wonderful. It will have an impact, but it will lack the transformation at the levels where transformation might be very difficult to reach. It will be a quick dump of wonderful opportunities, but it will not change that where change is difficult. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I wish that when broadband is rolled out, we must also, when a solution is rolled out to WCD 1,500 schools approximately, this solution should also cater in diversity in terms of can we reach those schools.
All right, thanks so much. I think we're going to have to leave it there for now. But thanks very much. Can we have a big round of applause for the panel?
Thank you.